Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Data Protection Made Easy podcast. This is season 2, episode 8, where we're here today talking about culture and awareness in compliance. Today, I am joined, as always, by Catarina Santos and by a very special guest today, Kathryn Brooks. How are we both doing?
Good, thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
It was a really interesting session. I must admit, probably something that we could have spoke about probably for the rest of the day today.
Mm.
But I really enjoyed the value that we was able to bring in those 45 minutes. Catherine, how did you find the session being your first time on the podcast?
Yeah, first time on the podcast. Thank you so much for having me. I thought the session was great, brilliant questions, and a good back and forth between the three of us. I feel that we have scratched the surface on this topic, and it is definitely something that we could talk far more extensively about, and lends itself to a few subcategories as well on how to handle this.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Kate?
Yeah, I love the session. Absolutely. I think it's always a very, very interesting topic. Training awareness culture, even mindset. It was actually a concept that Kathryn developed loads during the session, which I really, really hope that you had the time to hear. But I think individuals in general and organizations in general as well tend to focus on heavily handle training and awareness and posters, and that's it. Is a checklist and next to the next step task. But actually, culture is so much more than that, and awareness as well. And it's something that really is about what happens in everyday working life. So definitely a very interesting topic, and I absolutely love this session. Hopefully, there will be a session two about this. And what about you, Caine? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, absolutely. I always really enjoy talking about culture. I always think it's a really beneficial conversation for the community as well, because from my experience, I know that it's something that people can find a little bit difficult and struggle with. So I think it's really great to get insight both from yourself, Kate, and from you, Catherine, both with having different levels of experience and sort of trying to raise that awareness and culture and some different examples in doing so. So I hope it's a really valuable session for the listeners, but I won't give too much away. We will let you jump right into the session, and we hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think it's best that we get stuck in as soon as possible because we're in for a very interesting session, and I'm sure as you can tell that it's not just me and Kate today, and we're joined by the lovely Kathryn Brooks. So it's really nice to have you, Kathryn.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm
Ah,
excited to be here.
it is really nice to have you. So, Kathryn, I prepared a little bit about yourself, so please jump in
Mm.
if I do miss anything, and I would love you to as well if you have anything else to add. But for the ones that don't know Kathryn is an experienced data protection and privacy professional. She is well a public speaker and a lecturer that spent years helping organizations move beyond the policy-led compliance and build actually a privacy culture. And currently, Kathryn works for education sector as a DPO for Cambridge Education Group, and is very particularly passionate about turning awareness into real behavior change, which is definitely a matching with our today's topic. So it's really, really nice to have you here, Kathryn. I'm not sure if I missed anything relevant.
That sounds great. Yeah, no, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here and talking about this topic is something I feel very passionately about. For anyone who has seen me waffle on at conferences, you'll know that this is a subject matter that's close to my heart. And for years, I have been focused on helping businesses not only set the gold standard for their privacy and compliance laws and frameworks within organizations, but thinking going beyond that and how to really embed a positive privacy culture and mindset for all persons at the organization.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
a really interesting topic and conversation that me and Kate always find, and we always love talking about these kind of things in particular because it tends to be the stuff that we feel a little bit more far removed from, isn't it, Kate, in terms of
Mhm.
our position externally speaking. But I know before we sort of kicked into some of the main bits of the session, you had a few bits that you wanted to ask or raise, didn't you, Kate?
Yeah, so I just before, normally in terms of topical sessions, we take a couple of seconds or minutes to news topics. So I think the one that I would like to raise is about the IAPP, the conference where the Information Commissioner John Edwards was there and he gave a speech. So I would just like to raise that he made a speech, made like a little points about his path between that came from the pandemic, then the Brexit, and obviously the rapid the advance of AI and legal reforms that's obviously not only just due, but other pieces of legislation come, Online Safety Act, etc. He highlights, though, that is the point that I would like to make, that complaints to the ICO are rising and are expecting to grow from around 40,000 to 75,000 cases. And made the point as well that regulators and organizations simply cannot respond by throwing more resources at every issue. That was the point that actually we made a couple of episodes ago. So please just put people working from the ICO just to raise the complaints. What they are now doing is focus on managing the highest risks first and then go through all the other cases in terms of cases. Finally, he noted as well that will be his final appearance at the conference and his current capacity. And this obviously shows the restructure of the ICO based on the due changes from the Information Commissioner, which will move from a single commissioner model to a board-led structure. So this kind of matches with his role expires as well in 2027, so is a good match in terms of timings. But I would just like to raise this because I've seen so many articles in LinkedIn saying that he's resigned and the role, etc. And he's just make the point about it.
There was a lot of fluff around that, wasn't there?
Yes, yeah.
And some sort of immediate sort of like flinch reflexes from, I suppose, just people, even sort of internally and customers from who I've been talking to, where they assumed it was him sort of like stepping
just
down
resign,
from post.
I'm out.
I mean, based on the conversation, based on sort of the way it was phrased, I guess without the context, you could probably like rightfully assume that. But now obviously it's clear that because of the movements from the doer that we're probably going to be looking more towards the end of the board led thing with John Edwards stepping down. I still feel weirdly about their new complaint structure. I don't think it's going to work in the way that they think it will. I don't think it will seamlessly sort of cut out that response time for complaints, which is very obviously problematic as it stands, and doesn't seem to be getting any better. I know there's been talks about like graduate schemes to the ICO at the moment as well. I know that's something that's been sort of floating about. So maybe they're looking to try and reinforce some volume of staff and more resources through that way potentially.
Absolutely.
But I'm keen to watch what they're doing at the moment. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that piece in particular, Kathryn. I'm absolutely cool if not, but
yeah.
Well, I wasn't at the conference this year, unfortunately, but I think, you know, in my experience with the ICO, they're fantastic a resource to tap into when you need that guidance and understanding of frameworks and how, you know, legally what your obligations are as an organization, and of course the complaints procedure for individuals as well. I think what it's going to do is it's going to move businesses towards more internal resources and structures and being able to manage those complaints independently of the regulators and only really using that line for, you know, the big issues that need to be reported. So I think that there's going to be more onus on businesses having to step up that resource and understanding how to navigate through a complaints procedure rather than just, you know, directing towards the regulators and relieving the pressure in that respect. Now, I don't know what the stats are from the ICO, but I'd be keen to understand just the volume of complaints that they get through, both organizations and individuals. You know, they are a pillar for all of those things, and as understanding and awareness grows within not only industry but with individuals and what their rights and freedoms are, I can only imagine the trajectory of those complaints has been astronomical over the last few years. So something needs to give, because it certainly feels that a lot of complaints and a lot of the posts that I see online and commentary that I see online is very much like the ICO won't investigate anything. But you've got the big businesses out there that are then made an example of, and I don't know if anyone. Well, it was in the news this week, wasn't it, about Reddit? And, that is huge. But that being said, it's really just the big ones that we're seeing. So it'd be interesting to see how that change happens.
No, definitely. I'm sure it's something that everybody will be keeping a very close eye on in the coming weeks and months. As we see how the Information Commissioner now develops from that and the ICO. So I think it's an interesting time in that realm, and I'd love to see the breakdown in terms of the stats of the complaints they get and the nature of them. But I think if I had to guess, it's probably largely coming from members of the public, I imagine. I think probably based on what I see, but it could be an array of all kinds of things. So yeah, I'm keen to see the way that moves, and I really do hope for everybody's sake that they can manage to sort of streamline that complaints process a little bit more, because it does feel a little bit toothless as it stands. But we're not always sure of the inner workings. It's probably likely very difficult to deal with that many complaints. So I'd be interested to see how they bounce back on that one. But if we move on to the main topic for today, obviously we're going to be talking a lot about culture within businesses for data protection and for privacy. Now, I'm sure this is something that everybody feels quite passionate about in the main, predominantly just because it seems to be one of the biggest challenges that DPOs face. I think, at least from my experience, in being able to actively work with everybody in the business to make them care about data protection as much as you feel like they should. Kathryn, I don't know how you feel about that sort of statement from my end, of it being probably the biggest challenge of a practitioner. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen such a change of pace with culture and awareness over the last 5 years. When I started, it was it was like a compliancy tick box. You do your mandatory training and that is it. And the DPO is bought out of a cupboard when there's a breach or a risk. I wouldn't normally have been as involved with individuals as I am now. That's definitely scaled up massively. But it is important, and I know that we all feel very passionately about data protection, and it's you have to remember that not everybody feels as passionately about it as maybe we do. We're definitely kind of cut from a different cloth in that respect. But I think, when it comes to culture and awareness and mindset, it's about us recognizing what's important to that person we're speaking to. So, and if I'm delivering training to marketing professionals, that's going to be completely different to how I'm going to be training my financial team or my HR function. So it's about having that agile training, making it relatable to the individual, and also making it relatable outside of work as well. It's really important, I feel, that those who attend my training walk away and go, that's really interesting, because something has happened to me in my personal life, impacts this, and I'd like to find out a little bit more. So in most times when I deliver training, I will then get somebody get back in touch and say, I've had this really persistent marketing email and I can't seem to opt out. Can you have a look and see what I can do? And I get a lot of joy from that, because it's making it, beyond the 9 till 5, and people start thinking about it in all aspects of their life.
Do you think that's almost the key in sort of shifting that focus to cultural awareness, is kind of making it something that they almost are thinking about outside of the realms of work, and something that they treat as something more personal? Obviously, I know that we're always looking at personal data and data protection compliance from the perspective of businesses and customer data and all those lovely things, and even just data as an employee. But I think maybe especially from my perspective, the more time I spent in data protection, I felt more passionate about it as I started to think about it outside of the realms in which I already sort of operate. So from the perspective of looking at me as an individual and understanding sort of the real world ramifications of potential impacts of breaches or when compliance isn't followed as well as it should, I think maybe that's the potential wake up call that certain individuals might need to sort of take that culture a little bit more seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes beyond yourself as an individual. It's thinking about those people around you as well. You know, if you have children, the impacts on them, and what extra checks and measures we should be putting in place for children, and what potentially our schools are doing to ensure that they are protecting that, that data at all times, being mindful of children's exposure online, and what that we're giving them access to, and again what data is then going to be subject to disclosure to third parties beyond that initial application that they may have access to. So all of those things then apply. I mean, I've had some very valuable conversations not only around children and protecting them online, but the older generation as well, and what it means for our grandparents and our mums and dads if they're of a certain generation, and protecting them. A lot of information I share with my dad, because I know that he will click a link if he's waiting for a Royal Mail parcel, and doesn't have that digital literacy that you and I have. So it's about spreading that knowledge to all people around you as a general awareness campaign, beyond what we do in the day to day.
You know that I feel with some challenges that I face with the clients is so a couple of questions in terms of, like, for example, training only happens, for example, once a year, and that's enough. Policies exist, but they are actually not used because they are templates. They are not even customized and not applied to the reality. For example, staff members relying on guess. Okay, I think this sounds better, so I will do this. And one that I hear constantly is, because this is data protection, this is up to you, legal team or data protection officer, is not up to us. And I feel this lack of generic problems in global, I think is something missing within the culture of the organization. And I know as well, I feel like the leadership has absolutely a massive and important role to play here, because I don't think that culture can exist even if just the leadership just come back to us if there is an incident. There is a data breach and actually, I need to go to the data protection officer. What do I do now? And then we can all do the actions and see what actually happened. And I think if the leadership is not up to speed as well on this, can create a massive, massive problem in awareness and culture of the organization.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're never going to take these things seriously if everybody around you doesn't. If I'm a new start at a business and I've done my data protection training, because I'm a new start, maybe I've read the policies and procedures if they're pretty up to scratch, but I can see in practice, that nobody's actually doing it. It's probably reasonable to think that I'm also not going to do it because that looks like the norm. It looks like the standard, specifically when people in leadership positions also don't take those things as seriously. It's got to start from the bottom, but it's also got to start at the top. It's got to trickle all the way down. And there's always going to be outliers. It's not always possible to make everybody sort of sing off that same hymn sheet. And you've got to be able to be prepared for that. But I think one of the bigger things for me, and I was having this conversation yesterday as I was on site with a customer. And I looked at some of the refresher training. I was having a peek around sort of how they did that. And I don't know if either of you spend a lot of time sort of looking at some of the refresher training that maybe your customers use or you've seen sort of people sort of advertise. But it was a lot of things, and I have a lot of words on it, I suppose. But it just made no sense. It served no purpose other than to confuse and to kind of like it felt like, in effect, especially what I was reading, it felt like scaremongering almost to make data protections feel like this scary thing, especially in relation to personal data breaches. I think first and foremost, the start of the session started talking about a breach immediately. It was literally the first slide. It was a video on a personal data breach. Went straight into what the breach was. Didn't explain the ramifications of a breach. Said, personal data breaches have ramifications and personal data breaches happen. And that was, and it affects personal data. And that was it. And it's like, okay, well, what is personal data? What are the effects? How do they happen? And then the next slide is, personal data breaches have massive ramifications, not just for the organization, but for you as an individual. And then telling people that they can, like, a person can be fined even like 17 million off 4% of global annual turnover. Well, this is crazy. It's like you are like terrifying these poor people. And I think a lot of what comes in with building that sort of, the person to come to, and as a DPO, you kind of need to be that. You need to almost be that shining light of empathy a lot of the time, of being someone that people actually want to talk to. You can't go around kind of like cracking a whip, because if not, people are probably never going to want to talk to you. I think Phil used to speak about the person who used to have the ruler, and if they ever
Yeah.
like these slap the ruler on the desk, yeah. Not obviously hitting them, that would be a completely different problem, I think, in itself. But I also think a lot of it comes in the perception of data protection to a lot of people, especially in relation to breaches, and a lot of people feeling very, very scared about the consequences to them as a person if they then have to then go to somebody about it, which I feel there's a lot of like rug sweeping that goes on because of that lack of knowledge that exists there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This whole fear, uncertainty, doubt approach that lots of training has is not fit for purpose. All you're going to do is alienate yourself from the rest of the business. We need to get into those conversations early doors and be seen as a strategic partner in order to be able to ensure that project delivery systems set up are done in a compliant nature. Hearing a problem, looking at a solution, making it fit with the boundaries of the law, having that agile approach, and I keep using that word, is so vital, I think, for what we do. You can't go in, it's just scaremongering. Absolutely, it doesn't serve a purpose, and people become a little desensitized to it, because they just hear these, colossal fines and regulatory enforcement, and they think, is it though? Will it though?
Yeah.
Is that going to happen? But if you make people understand just really what the ramifications can happen. So with us, you think, well, okay, you might not get fined, you might not get an enforcement notice, but your customers will certainly talk about it. And we deal with students, and they're all on social media. So you end up, upsetting some students. They're going to go to social media and they're going to start talking about it. So the reputational impact can be absolutely detrimental, and trust can be lost in an instant and then take so long to build back up. And I think if you start talking in those sorts of frameworks, it becomes more understandable to your C-suite and your stakeholders. If you start talking about your return of investment, if there is, if you put good processes, robust processes and systems in place at the beginning, then you don't have to retrofit something at 6 months down the line, which could be quite costly, both resource and financially. So change the narrative. Don't go on with those big regulatory fines. Don't start quoting articles of the GDPR. It just won't wash, but make it understandable to businesses. And ultimately, businesses need to harness innovation. They need to move forward. They need to be profitable. So what you're doing is around supporting those objectives. What are the pillars of the pillars that the business is pinned on? What is their culture? What is their objectives for the year? And how can what you're doing fit around that and use that and support that? And that way you get that buy-in from the top. That trickles down, and then you can start talking about things like 80% of data breaches are caused by an email being sent in error. And we've all had that gut-wrenching moment where we've sent an email and gone, it's gone, and then you spend 25 minutes trying to recall it, and it's gone out into the ether. You can't recall it. But being a sympathetic and empathetic professional means that people go send an email and go, oh, okay, I know that I can pick up the phone and go, this has happened. What can we do? And it's a quick response. It's a more supportive response. And people leave feeling like, okay, I made a boo-boo, but actually I was well supported by the data protection team. I understand where the issues happened and how to prevent that from happening in the future. So yeah, it's important to have those two approaches, to go trickle down from the top and push up from the bottom.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And a little bit of it in my mind comes from also knowing the people that you work with, and then getting to understand them from not just from a business perspective, but more personally as well, as much as you can achieve that to an extent. Is you want to feel like as much as they need to understand the importance of your role, you also, if you understand the full context of how they work and how they relate to the business, and as well as the common problems that you can face, you can work a lot more collaboratively together. And you also don't feel as much, I wouldn't feel that you feel as much panic in going to them about a breach. You would feel like, oh, like so and so in data protection has always been very, very easy to work with. We know them because, they're around the office, and we'll see them and we'll speak to different teams often. And they did an awareness thing with my team the other week. So it's like, I know that they're here to support me. And I feel like sometimes it feels easy to feel isolated as a DPO, and you've kind of sometimes maybe got to like crowbar yourself into becoming like
Mm.
a face that people are kind of used to seeing, and I think that goes a long way. I mean, I think that's easy enough for me to say is the issue, because I don't actively have to do it a lot. So I suppose sometimes I will miss the more real world issues, I guess, that people will face on the ground every day, apart from sort of like what I sort of see from my own isolated sort of situation.
Hmm. I think I think the employees, they do not need to remember these complicated rules. That's our job. It's our job to know the articles. That's our job to know how to do things, and we can help them. I think when I was actually delivering training a couple of weeks ago, and while I was doing it, I was just like thinking about it at the same time, and I realized that actually, among other, obviously, another task, my job actually is make it obviously as easy as possible, but as well as we can make it happen in a sense of like default sharing settings are restricted. Like if there are templates already absolutely ready to use and remove any personal data from there, or things make it simple for them to use, because I came to the conclusion that sometimes the employees are the ones, unfortunately, to blame, but they have the will to learn. They want to learn. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They actually just don't have sometimes time. They're just busy. They have other priorities within their own role. And I think if we do make it as much easier as possible, and these campaign like awareness campaigns, make them relatable to them, even as an individual, aside just from employee side, uh, completely stay away from these making scared of interacting with other people, and as well as create an environment from the managers to from their managers or head of departments to actually talk about their protection as a topic as any others. So make it as a daily basis situation that is just another thing. And I think it makes easier to raise this culture within your organization, because unfortunately sometimes you just missed, and we are just talking about their protection when or something wrong happens, or there is a refresher training / induction training, and those are these moments, and that's it. And shouldn't be. It should be a day-to-day basis, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I've just seen a message come through on the chat about volunteers in teams. And yeah, I full-heartedly support getting your privacy champions in place. For us, we're a small team covering a big business. And that's probably the same for many of you out there. We can't be in all places at once, especially when we've got multiple centres and offices globally. It is important that you get your champions in place. So we do that. We have a privacy champion network. It's those who have, they feel passionately about certain topics and themes, and they're keen to either learn more or be that pillar for resource and guidance. They're not there to handle breaches or complaints or do any of that stuff, but just signpost people within their team, and also put privacy matters on the agenda. So if they are talking about a new initiative, be an ear out to say, hey, we might need to speak to the data protection team on this. And there's a when I think it was Admiral, when the Data Protection Act was first introduced, and Ellie Dowsett, for anyone knows Ellie, references this story or this fact, is when GDPR came into effect, the Admiral Group got everyone together and said they've hired 600 privacy champions to support the organisation, and everyone's looking around going, oh my gosh, who are these 600 people? And it wasn't. It was just everybody's responsibility to be a privacy champion. But it's that kind of mindset, like everyone has a role here, everyone has a responsibility here, and it will vary and it will change, but be forthcoming with that information, share, keep talking, have those roundtable discussions, have those focus groups. If something's not working, is it system related, is it a training related thing, and what more can we do beyond the training piece as well? And we have, mandatory annual training, but we also have 6 modules available at any time for people to book into a course. We do things like data clinics on a Friday where people can just drop in and have those conversations off the record. We have newsletters that are seasonal, so when it coming up to Christmas parties, for example, we're like, leave your laptop in the locker or take it home first, don't take it to the pub with you.
Please.
Yeah, just those gentle reminders, because we've all been there. Go to the pub after work, have a couple of drinks, and it's then a risk. All that information is in your laptop bag, along with work phones, work passes, anything else that you may be storing. Looking at what's happening in the media, sharing what we're doing. If there is a significant breach with what happened last year with Marks and Spencer's, we did talk about that and say, this is what happened here. This is how we are, the robust frameworks we have to prevent this from happening. But here are some quick tips to help us. So it makes it relevant as well, and gives individuals reassurance around infrastructures beyond compliancy, and data protection, and harnesses that collaboration piece with other teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big things that I sort of picked on there that you said was in relation to sort of awareness just sort of outside of the training, and that's something that I'm really keen to promote, is making those little reminders, even if there's nothing that feels particularly relevant to whatever's going on. If you can sort of shoehorn that back into data protection, just as little things to keep it at the forefront of the brain. I mean, for example, obviously, you have the standard sort of data protection day stuff, which I always encourage people to go out there and do something with the broader business if you can, whether it's, those kind of daily clinics that Kathryn has been speaking about there, or if you decide to do something that's more of the whole shebang, even if you can just get people in a room, entice them with, free food or cake or whatever it is, whatever will bring them in the door, and maybe not even necessarily talking or lecturing them about data protection and the importance of them, but just reminding them of the short little things that they need to take away, and some quick wins that you can sort of box off and tell them that will improve things dramatically. I mean, it comes about understanding your business as well, and understanding where the risks sit specifically for you guys. If you know that you predominantly use Outlook to share a lot of your data, then it's all about, I mean, it's pointless telling them about sharing it through other means if you know that that's the way that you standardly do things. So it's about adopting that approach, not to maybe what you're seeing other people do, but to what works for the business as well, and absolutely take inspiration from what you're seeing. I mean, I think the benefit of having a community like this is you have the opportunity to learn from people who are very experienced, people who are maybe not so experienced, and it's a great opportunity for everybody to come together and learn from one another, which is fantastic. So it's all about learning what works for you guys, and what helps your teams and your business works best, and that's that's why it's such a difficult that's why it's such a difficult task, really, in reality, I suppose. But it's all about trying to tie that end to everything you do, and the policies and procedural work. Absolutely, I think your training is only as good as your policy and procedures allow you to be. So it's important to make sure that those two have that very obvious interlink as well, instead of having the training that's separate, having the policy that's separate and feels more like a template, something that is very sort of skeleton like, and then building that into what we know and what we know about the business as well, because there's some real benefit in having really strong templates, but then being able to work that into something that
Absolutely.
is where the key is, I think.
Yeah, I think the processes actually, because one thing that I always hear about when we're talking about awareness is awareness equals to training. That's it. So they think, okay, training, deliver it once a year, check, done, next task. And I think he's so much into it, isn't it? And we are just talking and dividing about it now, and it's amazing. But you are definitely touching a very dear point to me, that is the processes need to match kind of the human behavior, right? So there need to be real improvements and practical, because people are busy. The people are multitasking. People are just prefer obviously the shortcuts because that will save some minutes to go and look into those emails, etc. So we need to make it simple. We need to make our process and procedures, as for example Phil loves to do, and we are trying to continue, is like always add, for example, flowchart, or having posters all over the place that are easy to understand and easy to address if needed. So I think definitely is one thing to consider. But I do have a question, because it's only something that my clients do like to ask me with very often actually. That is, or make the point, and then I'm just making the question to you both. That is, what if, and I appreciate all of this, but what if even the leadership do not take their protection as a priority? They don't care, they don't have see in the priority until, again, as we saw, an incident happens and something bad happens. How should we kind of implement all of this, which you're saying, if the leadership do not care and do not take data protection as a priority?
I think you have to approach it in two ways. You have to change the narrative, change the messaging, what's important to the senior leadership team, and how can you pivot your thinking to make it more relatable to them. Secondly, taking a ground up approach instead. If everybody starts talking about it and it starts feeding up to that more executive level, then they'll start noticing and recognizing that it's something that needs to be taken seriously. And ultimately that becomes a risk in itself, right? So
Absolutely.
you have to then think about, if you do have some form of risk management framework or a risk committee where you are sharing those to a wider group, then that in itself becomes a risk. And then you can start reporting on it and actioning it with others. So that's kind of my thoughts on those things.
Really interesting. And I mean, I think you're right. It is kind of a two-pronged thing, isn't it? You kind of got to work really hard to try and change that perception from leadership, and maybe you won't be able to get to that point in time, but it's then about being able to hopefully sort of reinvest that trust into other people in the business. And again, it can be difficult when you feel like things aren't going your way and that it's a little bit of an uphill battle. And it definitely can be an uphill battle if that is the case. If you feel like you're maybe not being supported in the ways that you can be. And as we've sort of been talking about, the buy-in always does tend to come from the top, or we want it to.
Yeah,
people
of
follow
course.
suit, but there will always be individuals in the business who are willing and also feel that they want to protect data at the forefront, because people do. There is no one that is intentionally doing breaches. No one actually wants to do a breach. It is always typically from the cause of fault and mistakes, and it's about making them, not even making them understand why they should care, because they do care naturally, and most people do, but it's about informing their decisions on how to take that care that they have and actually applying it in sort of that sort of broader compliance spectrum, but to a minimized degree to what relates to them. As long as they can focus on the wins for them and them as who they are. If everybody could do that and take ownership over their own kind of things with the support of the people around them, then hopefully you'd have a much more sort of well cultured business. But I think that's
Absolutely.
maybe that's wishful thinking. I don't know. It could.
Yeah. Again.
It's that hamster wheel, isn't it? Never really
Definitely felt that with the duo. It's just like, oh, okay, there we go again.
In a couple of years, I'm sure it'll be something else.
Absolutely.
I'm aware we got a couple of minutes left, so I think to tail off, I'd be really keen to get both of you thoughts, sort of some finalised thoughts on what you think helps make good culture in a business in relation to compliance?
Kathryn, you go first.
So, I think culture comes secondary to mindset. You're not, I
See.
certainly feel you're not going to win any prizes going into a business and trying to change culture. I don't think that's going to potentially get the right response from your C-suite of staff. You know, the CEO doesn't want you to kind of come in and go, oh, this culture is wrong. But by shifting mindset, by proxy, the culture changes and shifts. You need to have your own vision and mission statement to run alongside the company's one. And I think with that synergy, it will really help. So yeah, mindset first, then culture. Change of mindset will improve culture.
That's really interesting. I
Absolutely.
don't think I've ever. I mean, I think it's a very logical way of thinking. I just don't think I've ever. You always sort of think it's always like, how do we change culture? Or this culture is objectively not quite right, or they need to work on their culture. But maybe that stems from shifting their mindset. No, I think that's very, very well put, actually.
Yeah, I'm definitely not putting myself here after Kathryn, so I'll just subscribe them.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I completely agree with everything that has been said. And I mean, I suppose culture is what as your culture is as good as you want it to be. To an extent, you know, you're definitely going to hit walls. And I think sometimes it's about knowing when. Maybe I don't know best to say this, but knowing when is enough to stop pushing as hard for certain areas. Some things might not be able to give as far as you would like, and sometimes it's knowing that that is okay as well at the same time, and then trying to, you know, some things will just fall on deaf ears. It's understanding how we can identify that risk. We know it's a business risk now that maybe a certain team just won't follow certain practices, and we can't force them. You know,
Yeah.
at no means do we want to be in that position, but and maybe we don't have the buy-in from leadership. But then it's what do we do now? We've identified this risk
Yeah,
to
I think that's
mitigate the
it's about
possibility.
changing, isn't it? Like changing the way you approach it. Probably is like, okay, I have this risk. I have identified that this did not work, and you just make it your mission. I will make this work no matter what.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, I suppose it's not about being a broken record if you feel like there's no benefit there, and you want to make sure that you're spending time on people that are willing to adopt that mindset. And if you feel like there are areas that don't, you work as hard as you can to change that mindset. If you feel like it's not probable, then you know we've got to look outside of that. As okay, maybe we can't build the culture around this specific area, but what we will do is we'll implement this feature to streamline this process that maybe will make it easier to send out those emails and mitigate the chances of risk, because we know that this works better than that and it doesn't actually cost them any more time. So we'll try find solutions like that, and maybe there's a workaround and maybe there isn't. And you know, sometimes it's just about accepting that and being prepared to respond to them in time. You know, it's not, I don't think we all live in this sort of idealistic sort of world where you know, we can
Nothing
shift
happens.
everybody's mindset and no breaches will happen as a result of it. So it's all about being able to react quickly and effectively, because as good as your culture is, these things will still happen, and there may always be a few sort of chinks in the armor. You know, it is not a foolproof strategy. It never will be. Security in itself isn't foolproof. You know, there's always going to be elements of gaps and ways of workarounds, and of course, as naturally comes with everything. So it's about being resilient and having that support to be able to bounce back as well if you got some buy-in from people in the business as well.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose.
Yes, that was great.
On that note, so yeah, on that note, Kathryn, thank you very, very much
Thank you so
for
much.
joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, we really appreciate everything that you brought to the session. We hope everybody listening enjoyed also. We will be back again next week for a GDPR radio session. I will not be there, so I think we'll be joined by Mark again. Obviously, if anyone remembers Mark from the last session, hopefully everybody will be looking forward to have him back with Kate as well. We hope you all have a lovely weekend, and we will see you next week.
Thank you very much. Happy Friday.
Bye.
Bye, guys.